The governor squaring off against Democratic lawmakers. We'll take a deep dive into the battle to fix Illinois' budget. And things are heating up in the race for the White House. Debates are on the horizon, but who will get to take part? Plus, they want to represent Illinois' 18th district in the nation's capital. We sit down with all 5 candidates in the running. All that and more as we put Central Illinois on the record.
Now, from your local election headquarters, this is Central Illinois on the record.
Good morning and welcome to Central Illinois on the record. I'm Paul Cicchini, and each week we're taking a look at top political stories impacting you at the local, state, and national levels. We'll also talk to the people making decisions that impact you and your family. We begin with the back and forth over the state budget. Lawmakers in Springfield have left for the July 4th holiday without a spending plan. They made an attempt to pass a 30-day spending bill. It cleared the Senate but fell short in the House. The debate was heated.
What about those seniors that depend on home care services, and we are cutting them out?
So rather than doing our job, we're kicking it upstairs and putting the blame on somebody else, putting the burden on somebody else to do our job.
Now, even if it had passed, questions remained because the governor and attorney general couldn't agree whether workers would get paid. Lawmakers won't be back at work until Wednesday. So what does this mean? Here's a look at 5 things you should know about the state budget battle. According to the Illinois Policy Institute, no matter what stays open and what shuts down, state lawmakers still get paid. If there is a government shutdown, operations won't stop immediately, and schools are expected to start on time. Pension and debt payments can still be made, and essential services, state police, and state prisons will continue to run. WMBD is the only local station with the resources to cover all that's happening in Springfield. We have a 3-member team that makes up our Capitol newsroom. We're joined now by Bureau Chief Matt Porter. Matt, it's been a back-and-forth budget battle at the Capitol and on the airwaves, so where do we stand right now?
Well, where we stand is pretty much where we've stood for the last month and a half, which is that Democrats put a budget forth to the governor. The governor rejected that budget, pretty much the whole thing, and now we're at a point where we're at a stalemate. The Democrats say they want to pass a budget without having to deal with so-called non-budget issues that the governor has asked for, things like a property tax freeze, workers' comp and tort reform, and election reforms, including redistricting and term limits.
All right, so Matt, is there a sense that we're even close to a deal?
You know, we've been here 4 or 5 weeks now. You'd think we would be getting closer, but outside, when the public sphere, we haven't seen either party seem to bend on what they want. Now, on behind closed doors, when I've talked to lawmakers, they say they're very close when it comes to the actual budget. They say that's not the big problem. The big problem is Bruce Rauner's 5 points. That is that workers' comp and tort reform, the property tax freeze, and the election reforms. Those are the things that Democrats really oppose. They say passing any of those reforms could hurt middle-class families here in Illinois, and they also say they're not part of the budget. They say they're non-budget issues, and that they say the governor should not be holding the rest of the budget hostage for policy reforms, which are very controversial and will take a very long time and might be hard to get any Democratic votes.
Okay, so as this fight drags on, who actually stands to lose the most, governor or the Democrats?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. The governor, seems to have a lot of political power, and he also stands to not lose a whole lot. The governor isn't a politician in the sense of that we've known other governors to be before. We don't have a sense that he wants to go further politically past the governor's office. And frankly, he could take his millions, leave the governor's office, and go back to doing what he was doing before. So it does seem like the governor has a lot to do, but not a lot to lose. Now, Speaker Madigan, of course, has been the Speaker of the House for decades, and he has a lot of political power, and certainly he doesn't want to give in to the governor. So you could say Speaker Madigan may have actually more to lose than the governor. But you know what? When people ask who's going to lose more if this fight drags on, it's not the governor, it's not Democrats, it's the people of Illinois. As this fight drags on, we're going to see nonprofit groups lose money and potentially have to lay off workers because they depend on continuous funding from the state. We're going to see state workers who are now may not get their paychecks. It's a legal battle that's already beginning on whether or not they will get paid in 2 weeks. And of course, Illinois' reputation as a state that can take care of its business is at stake here, because if the two parties can't come to an agreement on a simple thing like the budget, well, then that gives Illinois a bad name for the rest of the country.
All right, thank you, Matt. Please keep an eye on it for us. That's WMBD Capitol Bureau Chief Matt Porter. Disgraced former Congressman Aaron Schock remains the target of a federal grand jury probe now 3 months after he officially resigned from his seat in Washington. More than half a dozen former staffers have testified behind closed doors in Springfield. Several county election commissions have also sent letters to Schock requesting he cover the costs of the special elections to fill the seat he left. In May, Schock told WMBD a report linking him to a possible donor swapping scheme was, quote, more nonsense. In June, Schock's Peoria office was raided by the feds. Speaking of Schock, we spoke with the 5 men running to fill that empty seat in Congress still ahead. How they responded to our questions about some of the biggest issues facing the district and our country. They range from a current state senator to an insurance company employee to a guy who calls himself a regular Joe. Darren LaHood, Mike Flynn, and Donald Reince are the 3 Republicans looking to land Illinois' 18th district congressional seat. They, along with Rob Mellon and Adam Lopez on the Democratic side, round out the pool of candidates. State Senator LaHood has been busy since announcing his run, splitting time on the campaign trail and in Springfield as lawmakers battled over the budget. We sat down with the Republican and started asking about recent Supreme Court decisions, including how justices ruled on Obamacare, something with which he disagreed.
If you remember the promises that were made, you're going to be able to keep your doctor. Your premiums are going to go down. This is going to be, an economic boom for our country. None of those things have happened. And so when you look at, how we change those things, I start with the premise that taking 1/6 of the private sector economy and turning that over to the federal government is not good public policy. And so, we have to fix that. We have to make it, more economically sound. We have to look at market-based principles. We have to look at the doctor-patient relationship.
Same-sex marriage. Civil unions in Illinois, but now same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states. What's your reaction to that going forward?
Yeah, so in the state Senate, I had an opportunity to vote on same-sex marriage in Illinois, and I voted against it. I think the sanctity of marriage is between a man and a woman.
We're looking at opening an embassy, again, in Cuba, Cuba opening an embassy in the United States. Where do you stand on that issue and how to move forward with Cuba?
Well, I think a couple things. I think in terms of opening markets for our farmers, particularly in Cuba, I'm supportive of that. If you look at, this is the 17th largest ag district in the entire country. Of the 435 congressional districts, this is the 17th largest. When you think about the commodities that are grown and produced in central Illinois, we have to open up more markets. That's jobs and economic opportunity for our farmers and our ag community here in central Illinois. In the past, obviously, Cuba has had some issues with human rights and other things, but I think this is a way to transition them to democracy and to economic freedoms, and I'm supportive of it.
Do we need more American boots on the ground in the Middle East to combat this threat of ISIS?
I think we made a real mistake in pulling out our troops out of Iraq that President Obama did. If you look at every conflict the Americans have been successful in over the last 80 years, we've kept troops there. Whether it was World War II in Germany, we still have bases there today. In Korea, we have troops and bases in Korea. In Japan, if you look at what happened in Bosnia 15 years ago, the reason why you don't hear about a conflict in Bosnia is we have troops on the ground there.
You can hear lots more from Senator LaHood. Just head over to our website, ciproud.com. He's a teacher, veteran, and former small business owner now. Rob Mellon is one of two men running for the Democratic nomination in the state's 18th congressional district. We sat down and talked about issues from guns to the Supreme Court. Where do you stand on the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I support the Affordable Care Act because I support health care reform. It's important to remember where we were at before health care reform even took into effect. We had almost 50 million people who didn't have health insurance. If there are other parts of the plan, it doesn't get rolled out in its entirety until 2022. So there's time to work on things that maybe or tweak things that weren't working effectively, and those things that we know the American people want, we can keep and expand and protect the Americans and starting in a situation where we get full health care coverage in the country.
Is it too easy in this country for the most dangerous people in America to get their hands on guns?
I mean, that's always a question. For me, I think we do have ample gun laws. Sometimes the enforcement is not there, so the funding is not provided for the enforcement. So I think if there were proper funding, some of those laws could be more effective. Now, in the terms of, I would not be in a favor of like a registration, but if we had a case where you did background checks, I would certainly support something like that. And I know there was a Toomey Manchin bill that had been put forward and it didn't succeed, but I think I could fall in line with something like that. But overall, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, people's right to bear arms, and I wouldn't want to take that away.
Your experience in the classroom, how has that shaped your thoughts on how we evaluate student performance and how we fund our schools?
Well, if you look at Common Core, I think it starts with an admirable goal. And the goal is to give our students the skills they need to compete in the new global economy. And so the higher thinking skills, critical thinking, that's going to be needed. More skilled type of jobs are going to be needed in the future. And so Common Core was directed in that fashion. But the challenge then becomes, how do you assess it properly? Now, if you do any assessment and it's focused on anything other than student achievement and measurement, then I think it's misguided.
Rob Mellon is running against Adam Lopez for that Democratic nomination. We'll hear from Lopez a little later in the show. Now, you can hear more from Mellon over at ciproud.com. Donald Reince, one of the three Republicans running for that GOP nomination, calls himself an average Joe, but he knows what he wants in Washington and shared his thoughts about change if he's elected to Congress. We began by discussing the recent Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage.
I'm so opposed to that.
How come?
It's a religious institution. I'm a Christian conservative, and marriage is between a man and a woman. And it's a religious institution, and government somehow got itself involved in it and decided to redefine it, it looks like now. I was hoping they wouldn't have passed that.
Let's move on to another major Supreme Court decision, and that was dealing with the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, another Supreme Court decision that in this case went in favor of the Obama administration and the lawmakers who crafted that law.
They passed one a couple years ago. They rewrote the law in order to pass it. The Supreme Court did. And the Supreme Court is not a legislative body. I don't know how they get around rewriting a law to make it pass the Constitution. Now here, they just redefined it. They didn't rewrite it, because it was clear that the states that had exchanges were the ones that were going to get the subsidies. The author of that stated that. And to have the Supreme Court go out and change the idea of what that meant is wrong.
What are your thoughts on the prison system in America?
In America? or
Yeah.
the state. I know the state prison fairly well. And,
Well, a lot of prisons across the country have, been privatized in effort for
Yeah.
states to save money, but then you have quotas for companies who, need people in the prisons to make a profit. So it's a big business. I mean, there's
Yeah.
more invested in prisons across the country than there is in education.
I don't like privatization of prisons. That should be under the jurisdiction of the government, not farmed out, because now you got one more step away from the government. And if the jurisdiction of that prison is under direct control of the policymakers, then you as a citizen can help control what goes on within the prisons and help control the budgets and stuff like that.
Again, Donald Reince is among 3 Republicans running for Illinois' 18th congressional district seat. The primary Tuesday, July 7th. If you want to hear more from Mr. Reince, you can do so at ciproud.com. 3 down, 2 to go. We hear from the other 2 men running to replace Aaron Schock. Five men are running to fill the congressional seat vacated by Aaron Schock back in March. Now, we've heard from 2 Republicans, State Senator Darren LaHood and Donald Reince, and 1 Democrat, military veteran and teacher Rob Mellon. Democrat Adam Lopez is a Springfield School Board member and an employee at Country Financial. Lopez says he supports the Supreme Court's decision on the Affordable Care Act, but thinks there's room for improvement.
We all need to work together. I mean, the Affordable Care Act is changing lives every day. And inside the insurance business here, when I'm at Country Financial, I'm signing clients up that are getting Affordable Care Act. And everybody should have the, I guess, should have the approach that they can get affordable health insurance. That should be the American dream, that we can get everybody health insurance. I think we have to give it time to work. Everybody wants to happen overnight. It's not going to work overnight. Give it time. It will work. But it needs some tweaks. Everything will need to work out. I mean, nothing is perfect. So when we go to Congress, we have to work together of how we can get better. And we also need to look at the state of having their own program. I think that's Senator Durbin talked about that a week ago about how we need to look. Governor Rauner needs to maybe look at that, get a state-run plan here. So it's something we have to look forward to.
Kind of sticking with the theme of the Supreme Court, another major ruling recently was that of gay marriage. Where do you stand on that issue?
I support same-sex marriage, and the Supreme Court is with me on that, so I am a strong supporter of same-sex marriage.
Where do you stand on the Second Amendment?
I believe in the Second Amendment. Tell you the truth about myself, I don't own a gun. I've never shot a gun. But I believe in the Second Amendment, and we have to, again, you're going to hear a lot of me working together, because I think the problem we face now and what is facing in D.C. is everybody's you're on this side or this side. We all have to come to the middle, and I'm looking forward to working together how we can help out. Gun owners, I understand. We have 90% of gun owners are responsible. Now, There's a few that aren't, and we run into some problems. But majority of gun owners are responsible, and we need to go forward and work together how we can help out with gun laws and guns not getting into, criminals' hands.
Is it too easy for some of the most dangerous people in the country to get their hands on guns?
No, I think the problem we have now, you could probably get a hold of a gun, and that's not responsible gun owners' fault. If you hear about a lot of the guns found or used on crimes, they're stolen.
Lots more from Lopez on the web, ciproud.com. Mike Flynn rounds out the Republicans running for Congress. He's worked in both Springfield and Washington, D.C., and in the media for Breitbart outlet BigGovernment.com. We had a chance to sit down with Mr. Flynn to talk guns, Obamacare, and whether he supports gay marriage.
But the question is, marriage is a religious institution, and the debate will be about whether religions have to recognize it, and religious people have to recognize it. The fight for religious liberty is going to be one of the central fights of the coming few years. And I think we have to absolutely protect the freedom and the dignity of religious people to not participate in gay services or gay marriage or perform gay services.
Obamacare.
And I think Obamacare has to be gone. It has to be repealed. It has to be taken out, because it'll get worse every year it's on the books.
What about the millions of people who are benefiting from having insurance, many of them for the first time?
Yeah, well, there's other ways they can benefit. You've got to bring the consumer into the center of the healthcare system. Right now, all we're doing is we're debating who's paying for healthcare, but we're not actually discussing that patient-doctor relationship. And that should be the foundation of healthcare system. The Obamacare moves us in the wrong direction, and it will get far worse in the coming years.
Terrorism, ISIS, more boots on the ground in the Middle East?
ISIS is a medieval death cult. It has to be eradicated. The way we're doing it now is the worst of all worlds. We bomb them a little bit, just enough to get the propaganda victory, but not enough to kill them. I think we absolutely have to kill them. We're going to have to destroy them at some point. We either do it now with very few troops, or we do it in 5 years with the Fourth Army. One
last issue I want to talk about is guns. You call it a natural right, but is it too easy for some of the most dangerous people in America to get their hands on guns?
I don't believe that's true. I mean, in the latest examples we've had, these were not people that would have been banned from owning guns because of a criminal history. It is a fundamental right. The Constitution and the government does not give us a right to own handguns. We have that right. I think you've got to look. I mean, there's going to be violence in a city, in a country of 300 million people. You've got to look at the mental health system, which is a travesty in this country. And you've got to look at things like that before you just always rush to guns. The fact that a gun is used in a crime has nothing to do with the fundamental right to gun ownership.
You can hear more from my conversation with congressional candidate Mike Flynn on our website, ciproud.com. U.S. and Iranian officials go round and round trying to iron out a nuclear deal while negotiators are moving a deadline. Here's a look at some issues we're keeping an eye on. The United States and Iran still trying to hammer out a nuclear deal, but it's not going well. Iran is taking a hard line on two of the biggest demands, rejecting some inspection rules and threatening to ramp up enrichment of bomb-making materials if the U.S. and other countries reimpose sanctions. The deadline to reach a deal is Tuesday. Also on Tuesday, the 18th Congressional District Special Primary Election. Stick with WMBD, your local election headquarters. We'll have complete coverage Tuesday night on WYZZ News at 9 and WMBD News at 10. And as we mentioned earlier, it's back to the drawing board for Illinois lawmakers. They'll return to Springfield on Wednesday, hoping to hammer out a budget deal. They tried before the holiday to pass a temporary budget, but failed. Stay with us. We'll be right back. That's going to do it for the first edition of Central Illinois on the Record. Thanks for joining us. Of course, you can connect with us on social media using Facebook and Twitter. Just use the hashtag CIOTR. See you right back here next week.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of WMBD, WYZZ, or Nexstar Broadcasting Group.